Okay. Obviously, the Illuminati don't work alone. This is a no-brainer, and I've got, let me just say this in terms of the providence of information. Everything I tell you comes because I have at least 3 sources, and they're independent sources, and that's how intelligence agencies work also, by the way. They get 3 totally independent sources who don't know each other coming up with the same information, okay? And so that's what we do. We use that as sort of a barometer to begin our investigations, and then beyond that, I use my intuition, which has served us extremely well over the years in Camelot, and continues to do so. And beyond that, we may have personal referral, or we may have, go through the process of sort of vetting the person and finding out more and more about them, spending time with them. We end up being friends with a lot of the people we've interviewed. In terms of super soldiers, an interesting dynamic happened about 4 years into Camelot, in which the powers that be started to turn them against us. So that every time I interview anybody who's a super soldier now, and now the time span in which they turn against us is now down to like a few days or a week later. And I'm not going to name any names, but simply to say that, and then you'll kind of go on my site and you'll see who is who, and you'll probably be able to put 2 and 2 together. But the bottom line is that these people are programmed to turn like rabid dogs on humans when ordered to do so. I mean, that's the nature of being a super soldier. You work for the man, but you work for the man in such a heightened way that you're accessible. Why are you more accessible than the average person? Because they put their nanotech, their physical technology in your body, just as you saw with Kieran. And it's more than that. I mean, he maybe even be sort of like a sort of medium level super soldier kind of activated person. Now, when we say super soldier, it doesn't mean they have big muscles and they can throw things across the room like, whatever. That's not what, we're not the Invisible Hulk or whatever it's called. A super soldier means they have super abilities. So they're super psychic, they're a very good spy, they can use some special abilities to get from point A to point B, to psychoanalyze you, to do whatever they need to do to accomplish their mission. So that's what we're really talking about when we use the term super soldiers. But by virtue of being one, we have been told that certain super soldiers have self-destructs. If they were ever to turn against the United States, most of them are working for the United States, the secret space program, that they would instantaneously self-destruct. I haven't tested it, but it sounds believable. The person who told us that, among other people, was Dr. Pete Peterson. And our Pete Peterson, he's one of the very stellar witnesses who is a scientist, who is a Black Project scientist who grew up in Black Projects working for them. He was recruited at a very young age, and we spent an entire weekend with him. We did over 6 hours of interview with him, but the entire weekend, this is a man who had been quiet his whole life. They had sort of retired him to a certain area of the northern United States that was very sort of low density in terms of population, and figured he would just go into the night quietly, so to speak. He was burning to talk about what he knew. He felt a burning desire to also waken people. And this is what happens to a whistleblower. What happens is they actually come in with a mission. They're not even aware of their mission half the time. But partway through their service to the dark side, they start to wake up and they start to realize that they need to do something else, that they need to break away and they need to wake people up as to what's really going on. And they start to have a schism sort of in their personality in which they can't handle it anymore. And they become, even in some cases, like Richard Allen Miller and Henry Deacon, they become even slightly unbalanced as a result. They become so angry, like Bob Dean, Command Sergeant Robert O. Dean, that they break their security oaths and they go out and they start telling the truth. And what happened was, when we hit the scene back over 8.5 years ago, there was no organization like us. I don't know why we got this brilliant idea, but we did. And yeah, I'm sure we had help. But the thing is that we decided that we would start interviewing whistleblowers from above, top secret, and we sort of put out a shingle, we put out a website, and we found one person to start interviewing. And YouTube was there for us at that time, and it was a coalition of forces that allowed us to become who we are today. And basically, we never looked back. We had no idea anyone would ever watch our videos. We didn't know what was going to happen. Yes. Oh, yes. Well, I'll finish the story. So Pete Peterson is one of those witnesses. Now, Pete Peterson had this burning desire to talk, so we went to he invited us to his house. We were connected through a third party. And it was me and David Wilcock, and Bill and I weren't really getting along at that time. And by the way, Bill and I have split up, in case you don't know that. Some people really don't even know that. We split our sort of operations a long time ago. It's now been about 4.5 years. He went on to Project Avalon and has a forum over there, and is retired, or whatever you want to call it, to Ecuador. And I'm, still out on the circuit doing Camelot. So I took complete control of Project Camelot at that point. But at any rate, during the schism between Bill and I told David Wilcock that I had an incredible witness that had no way to get there. And so when David Wilcock heard about my incredible witness, he said, I'm going to make this happen for you. And so he did. He financially helped me pay my plane ticket, as I recall. And then all of a sudden we told Bill about it, and then Bill wanted to come. So then the three of us ended up there. And that weekend we went from the Friday, like late afternoon, and Pete started talking. He would talk into 4 in the morning every night, and nonstop. And this was all off the record. So he talked for the Friday night, all day Saturday, until Saturday night at 4 in the morning. And we were literally sitting around a table talking to this man. We would go to dinner with him, we'd go to lunch with him, we'd go to breakfast with him. I mean, he was talking nonstop for those 3 days. And at the end of the 3 days, we would be like falling asleep in the middle of the night, listening to him, and he would still be talking. And then he finally said, okay, now you can film me. So then on, I think it was the Monday or the Tuesday, we turned on the cameras, and he said, there's going to be things that I won't talk about. And we said, okay, fine, no problem. And he said, but if you ask me about those things, I'm going to tell you, that I can't talk about them. So we said, fine. And then he said, but if you ask me about those things, I'm going to tell you that you could get killed for asking me about this, or something to that nature. If you talk about them, if you bring them up, it's going to be on you. It's going to be, you're going to put your life in danger. And so, I guess he didn't really know my personality, because Bill's and David's interviews were fine, but mine was not, because I asked him some questions along the lines of the things he was talking about, like about the Terminator reality and Skynet, and the fact that that's real, and so on. And I started asking him questions about MK Ultra and various things. And even to this day, we haven't revealed what he really told us on every level. But the bottom line is, when you ask a question and you get sort of a denial of a denial, it basically tells the audience listening, that's where you should look. That's where the truth is. Because this guy doesn't want to talk about it. That's got to be really important. And that's a yes. Okay, so that's what happened. It was a sort of a catch-22 that he got himself into. So you'll see me on camera. If you haven't seen that interview, I highly recommend it. And I will ask him a question, and he will say, I can't answer that. And if I did, actually, you would get killed, and so forth. Well, ultimately what happened is I did get a death threat as a result of that interview. And apparently somebody intervened so that I wouldn't be killed. And I actually got a psychic download of how they were going to kill me before it happened. But it didn't happen, but it was called off, I guess. Well, obviously. But the thing is that, so this person asking me the question is saying, yes, I actually ran into Pete at the Pennsylvania event, which you might have heard of, that became kind of notorious, which was a very wealthy man in Pennsylvania who was throwing his coming out party because he was becoming awake and aware, and he wanted to tell his whole high level, he had very, very rich man, he and his brother, twins, rich men in Pennsylvania, part of high society. He wanted to introduce us to them. He invited us all in, expenses paid, to a weekend, and he brought Pete Peterson, and I think he's even funding his work at this time. But what happened is that Pete was there, and so we ran into each other because he wouldn't talk to me for 2 years, because he called me up sometime after we released the interview, and he said, you know, that's a really good interview, but actually, you know, your section is really bad, and I think you should really take it down. And I said, well, see, you have to know my personality. If you tell me something, I'm going to say, well, obviously that's the best part, right? Because that's why you want me to take it down. So that's basically what I said to him. So he got very angry, and what happened is he was called back to the Pentagon. He was raked over the coals. He says he lost a bunch of money because of Camelot, because it started to be going out there that he was a whistleblower. Now, see, I believe that he made a soul contract to tell the truth, because he wanted to save his own soul ultimately. And he has gone back to work for them, by the way. But what happened was 2 years later, we went to Pennsylvania. I ran into him. He said, you know, I'm not mad at you anymore. You're actually a brilliant interviewer. And it's all okay. So that's what happened with Pete. You know, it isn't an easy road, okay? It's not easy when somebody you interview and you put your heart and soul into the interview, and they do, and you know, you get it all done, and it takes hours and hours and sometimes weeks or whatever it takes to edit it, and then you put it out there, and it's all beautiful, and then it goes viral across the internet, because it never just goes on YouTube. All the Camelot interviews are downloaded all over the world instantaneously. They're taken, they're putting up on other people's websites. People are selling our videos and making money off us. I mean, they have whole websites built from Camelot videos. So there's no way that we can take back something once we put it out. I have, I don't know what the number is. It's something like 90,000 YouTube subscribers. That means every time a video goes out on the internet, you know, 90,000 people get notified, and you know, and then it goes viral from there, and our Facebook, and oh, it's crazy. But anyway, so this is the bottom line. So if you're in the audience, you're a whistleblower, you give us testimony, just know that once it's out there, it is out there. And any time Camelot tries to take something back or correct something of any kind, there's a huge conspiracy theory that gets generated, you know, because that's the world we're in, that nothing happens by accident, you know, so it's important. Okay, so now I'm going to sort of change gears. How much time do I have? Anybody? I think I totally left the people that are running this place in the dark. They're gone. They just left. They just, wait. Okay, I'm double clicking that. Is that there? Yeah, okay. Anyway, how much time, anyone want to tell me how much time I have? Oh, great. Okay. I'm not sure this is going to page down because I do have it up here, but it's not really... God, that's really bad. Okay, well, whatever. All right, so now I want to make a transition here, and I know people wanted me to talk about Kundalini, and I may have time, but I'd like to, with your permission, talk about Black Projects Follow the Money, because there are some key concepts here that help to help you understand the game that's being played. And basically, the Matrix movie, you know, one of the things, and this does relate to actually meditation and Kundalini, in the end, when they put the Matrix, you know, where you see the Matrix melting, I've actually had the experience where that actually happened to me long before the Matrix movie ever came out. And I have seen the Matrix melt. And so it's quite an accurate depiction. They must have had some good consultants behind the scene on that movie to give them that idea. But it really almost looks like that, and it's quite extraordinary. Okay, let me just see if I can get this going here, because I have to go through these pretty quickly. So, some people will know, you know who the white hats are. So raise your hand if you know who the white hats are. And I'm talking about a specific group who started publishing documented evidence of where the money was going, all the corruption in America and worldwide, but bottom line, especially America. They have that image of the white hat was on their website. They published what was called the White Hat Reports, and they were in operation for about 2 years, I think 2 years, maybe 3 at the most. At the end of the 3 years, I had gotten to know a couple of their members, one of which is called T-Man, and he came on my radio show and talked about the dinar revaluation. Some people may know about that radio show, was quite notorious. And the other one was Paladin, and I got to know both of those individuals pretty well, I would say. And I was actually asked to write a report, and the report I ended up writing is called Black Projects Follow the Money. And it's a written report. It's on Camelot, so after this presentation you can read it if you're interested, if this stimulates your interest. And the bottom line of why they were even in operation is they were a group of what was called white hats, for lack of a better term, which is sort of the good guys, who were cross-agency, cross-military, and also worldwide. So they had people that were coming together, retired policemen, retired, military, retired agents, even though you can never really retire as an agent, but you know what I mean. And so on. And they, in a sense, they're still kind of behind the scenes. They no longer publish reports, but they're sort of still out there. Anyway, what happened is they formed this network. They started publishing reports because one of the people, Paladin, is among others, and they were absolute financial experts. And he is a forensic financial investigator. He has some FBI training, I think he likes me to call it that. I've had him on my radio show. I've done a live stream interview with him. And so, you can go on Camelot and get all of the background. What happened is they started to publish all these reports that were revealing what the Bush cabal were doing, what members of the financial world were doing behind the scenes. And they had documented evidence, something, again, that Camelot doesn't do, but this is what they did. And it was very sophisticated financial documentation. It revealed what are called high-yield trading programs, which I think the bottom investment is something like, and I always get my numbers wrong because I'm not good with zeros, but it's something like $100 million, and it can only come from one individual. It's not like a bunch of people can get together and pool their stuff. And they vet them, and this goes through the CIA, or the brokers of this, and it's done on a worldwide basis by agents, and I know a couple agents who've done this. And they started to reveal the sort of tentacles of what we call the octopus, and especially the financial tentacles, and where they go, and people that they were trying to take them down. People like Obama, people like, well, let me just say, people in the administration on down, the top levels on down. And what happened is, over time, they were becoming frustrated because even though they put out all this incredible evidence, and actually, if you know who Lord Blackheath is here in England, his information when he went onto the floor of the Parliament talking about a sort of a benefactor who was going to finance the British government, and a bunch of missing money that was like in the trillions, and I forget how many trillions. Okay. Great. 15 trillion. All of that information a lot of it came from the White Hats, if not all of it, which most people don't know. But they were feeding him information, and then he went onto the floor as a very brave man to speak about it. And actually, that got buried. It just didn't go anywhere, for all intents and purposes. And there have been other attempts to out, in other words, the financial sort of scandals and breakdowns in our society, what's really going on with all of it. Anyway, so what happened is I wrote, they wanted to reveal the final sort of linchpin that has to do with Pure Heart Investments, and that's an actual name of an organization that's involved, who has a particular person at its top who is high level in the Bush cabal, who is orchestrating these trading programs. And all of the money from the trading programs goes into black projects and to funding the secret government and all of these secret installations around Britain and so on and so forth. So they do use things like drugs, pornography, sex, gambling. Those are all the usual suspects, so to speak. But the high-yield trading programs are very unique also because it gets into the what do you call this guy? Oh, God. Okay. Total... Anyway, it has to do with the IMF and the World Bank and going into countries like Africa and funding projects, the hitman, the economic hitman. So he's telling a side of that story as well. And Karen Hudis was telling from the World Bank side when she was working for them. So the White Hats were had put all of that together and was putting that out there even before or simultaneous to those other two. And so, painting that picture of what's really going on, the incredible debacle that is this sort of the gold, the hidden gold in the Philippines, it gets into that. And that's a whole saga. And I really went down that rabbit hole with them and learned a great deal in that regard. So that's what Black Projects Follow the Money. Basically, they asked me to write a complement to their research that would say, once it hit the sort of Black Projects secret space program, what was happening there? What was that about? Because they were sort of publishing to an audience who was maybe very hip financially, but they didn't know zip about the secret space program. So that's what Black Projects Follow the Money is all about. And I do highly recommend it. But what's interesting, like as a drama behind the scenes, let me see if I can get this to go. This is not very, okay. Richard Allen Miller, by the way, is another Camelot witness that had been out sort of talking a bit on the circuit. He'd been publishing in Nexus magazine, but he sort of got re-recruited once I gave him my attention, and was also getting, he was a brilliant physicist, and he was also training, he's kind of like, you might think of if Timothy Leary was a physicist, that's kind of what he is. He's like, if you ever saw Fringe, the television show Fringe, which has a lot of truth in it, by the way. And I think you saw it here in Britain. I think it's on your television. The mad scientist, he's a little like that guy. He's just like the wildest man you could ever know. And I did an interview with him. It's called The Magus Who Came In From the Cold, because he is a magician. Just like, you were hearing Simon Parks talk about his family being magicians. Well, Richard Allen Miller is top of the line OTO magician. Black magician initially, but he came over to the light, and he basically left the secret space program. He was going out of his mind. They let him go, and he started selling, this brilliant man, he went to the northern like Oregon, I think it was, and he started selling a job collecting pine cones and selling them. And he made like tons of money and reconstructed his life and became a herb farmer. And then he became like a natural farmer. And now his job, he's been re-recruited by Navy intelligence to go out and teach children how to grow organic, natural farms and to live off the earth. And because he believes that the children, I think they believe, that the children are going to have to feed the hungry at a certain point in our future trajectory. So it tells you something about the way they're thinking about the future. But Richard Allen Miller, he's out there testifying on all sorts of things, including Fukushima, brilliant physicist, brilliant mind. And this is also something that happens. You will see that Richard Allen Miller and, Richard Allen Miller, George Green, Pete Peterson, Henry Deacon, all of these people were all in their sort of middle age area, late Middle Ages, and middle age. And what happens is they were being put out to the pasture, so to speak, and they were recruiting younger, new blood into the scientific projects and so on and so forth. So those guys were being put on the wayside, and there are actually a number of others who became Camelot witnesses and whistleblowers. And what happens is once Camelot took testimony from those people, almost without fail, they've all been re-recruited back into the projects. It's crazy. But this is what happens. So I make them famous, and then they get re-recruited, and then they stop talking. Some of them tread this line constantly and stay out, and Richard Allen Miller is one of those. He's sort of playing the game very adeptly. But he will tell you unequivocally, and he's told me on my shows, that he has what he calls his get out of jail free card for doing what he's doing. Which is a card that allows him to go to Mars, to get off the planet if things turn south here. So, for what it's worth, and he's not joking. Okay. What do we have here? So, well, one of the things I've been told by whistleblowers is that that the countries are run by one individual. That whole, like North America is run by one guy, Europe by one guy. I mean, this is what's going on here. We really have, the pyramid, we have a pyramid structure of power, and at the very, very top, it has gotten very, very narrowed down. Now, all of those levels have some influence and they're now factionalization going on across the board, and they're warring with each other, which is slowing down their progress, so to speak. And helping you out because you are now able to start to fight back and become aware. But this situation, one of the things that Simon Parkes also validated, which I had been aware of, and I think some of you may be aware of, but it's important to know that GCHQ and NSA are like this. They're basically one organization. So anything you read about that NSA is doing is being done by GCHQ, okay? And that's not the only organization that's sort of working so hand and foot with the Americans here on English soil. Well, I can tell you that Men with Hill is doing that. There are many, probably, maybe even all of the, and this has been good. This relationship between America and Britain, and this just sort of really close, almost insidious relationship that has its upside and its downside, as I'm told. They are definitely working together, hand in hand. There's, in a sense, there are no borders. We're really talking about sort of coalitions now on planet Earth. And one of the coalitions, as you may know, is sort of the BRICS, what they call the BRICS. But there's also, what are as the United States, Britain, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and maybe France and Germany or something like that. So there's these groups, right? And this is how the world is being run, being orchestrated, and these are so you're looking at, I guess, realms of influence and associations, very close associations, and how this game is being played. It's hard to see. I don't actually have these frames on here, so I can't look at my computer and read them in case you think I'm crazy. Okay. This is, Rich Dolan is a wonderful author. You may have seen him speak. He's got 2 very thick volumes. I think it's 2, maybe it's 3, but at least 2 of UFOs in the national security state. If anyone wants to see sort of a litany of every UFO sighting that had any real significance, that was seen by a significant group of people, or by ex-Air Force or pilots, or policemen, or this or that, he's documented all of this testimony in his books, and he's really sort of diagrammed for you what is in essence the national security state, which goes beyond the American borders. Okay? And the NRO, we call this the octopus. I mean, that's what the secret space program is. It's like, in a sense, you can think of us as the host and the parasite. Okay, so that's the parasite, and we're the host. And that's really the relationship that you have to the secret government. So once you understand that, it's a rogue civilization, that you are feeding it, and it is not feeding you back. Okay, it is not supporting you back. It is going to take your children. It's going to use them for whatever it decides, depending on what they think about their, the IQ, their abilities, their bloodline, their this, their that, once they analyze all that. And so you have to understand that this means that it doesn't matter if you want to be in this situation. You can't close your eyes to it because you're part of it. And neither can all of your friends and family and all of these people who are actually closing their eyes and feeding the machine. It is a machine. It goes on with or without them, but basically it goes on with them because they're participating, because they have to pay their rent or whatever it is. So that's important.
10 minutes, Kerry.
Okay. I'm sort of jumping around here. Norm Bergram, that's an old man. He was like 85 when I interviewed him in Palo Alto, California. He'd worked in an underground base at Moffett Field in the secret space program in a very high-level scientist. And we were referred to him by John Lear, if you know who John Lear is. And brilliant man, Norm Bergram. He wrote a book, The Ringmakers of Saturn. His position, after a lot of investigation, was that there was a race of beings that occupied ships that were generating what are called the rings of Saturn. He believes they're building them, and that they were on the way here. That was what his message was and is. Right after I interviewed him, he had told me he had a new investor. He was all excited. They were going to build him a lab and so on. So 85 years old, he was like super 85 years young, as they say. My interview with him is fascinating. He's a brilliant man. And basically, they took him black. He now has disappeared off the face of the earth. He was thinking he was going to get to, I was like the first interview of many that he was going to be able to do. That's actually not what happened. They realized that they'd put another guy out to pasture and ignored him, and I discovered him, and then they re-recruited him. That happened to Bob Lazar too, by the way. Although supposedly Bob Lazar is out again, and recently George Knapp did an interview with him. In case you don't know who Bob Lazar is, he's the one who made Area 51 famous, S4. This is Robert Odin. I've interviewed him, I think 5 times at this point on video, and also had him on my radio show. Wonderful, wonderful witness, wonderful man. Definitely Pleiadian, got Pleiadian blood. He was part of the Old Boys Network, and he was let in on the secrets. And he has never, to this day, revealed everything he knows. Basically because he's trying to keep his wife alive and his family. Incredible man, incredible testimony. If you haven't seen it, you should watch every video I've done with him. Okay, bottom line, I actually asked Simon Parks, why is it that America runs the secret space program? Because that's really the evidence and the information I've gotten. And actually, to be specific, I've heard that America and Russia run the secret space program, and that Britain, Germany, and France have sort of a slightly secondary role. Bottom line is I was told by Simon today on interview, on camera, it's all because of the paperclip scientists that came over to America. That they had the technology, that they brought it to America. A few of them came to Britain, a few of them went to Russia, a few of them went to Argentina and work on an underground base there. But the bottom line is that's the reality that we've got going on in America, and that is front and center now. It's unequivocal. They've taken away most of our rights. They can just barge in and sort of take you out of your house at any point with no recourse and disappear you. By the way, I did an important interview with Gary McKinnon, as you may know, who revealed what are called fleet-to-fleet transfers and a list of non-terrestrial officers that are part of the secret space program, because he hacked into a Pentagon and NASA computers, and this is back now many years ago, using a dial-up modem, as you may know the story because you're British. But I was one of the first people to do a really in-depth interview with him in the early days before they got to him, and when he actually did say why he really did what he did. And if you haven't seen my interview, it was just actually they paid me $400 whole to put it on Ancient Aliens, that portions of that interview with Gary just recently. So it was put out on the television in the United States just recently as part of that television show. But at any rate, actually the actual name of that television show I think is called something like, what do you call this? Hangar 59, 49, 29, something like that. I don't know. Is it called Hangar 1? Okay. Anyway, that's what it was on, in case you want to see it. It's fun. Okay. At this point, I think I'll just take questions, because a lot of this is there's so many more areas and little, rabbit holes I can take you down. Oh, okay, so do I have any time left? No, but I mean right now, do I have time? 5 minutes, okay. I'm going to try to see, well, I will be able to cover some things that you want to hear about, because we do cover a lot in question answer sessions where I can go into, because I don't just answer with one word. So you'll see that I can kind of go into... one of the things that's going on in... by the way, it'll be interesting to you, because I just talked to Simon yesterday, and he gave, at least from the information he gets, and let me tell you that Simon Parks is super well read in, what we call read in. I could tell by his testimony that the guy knows way more than he's letting on, and that he's really being given access in a huge way to all of the secrets, which is quite interesting. It says a lot. And one of the things he did talk about was what's really gone on with the plane, the Malaysian airline 717, and the crash, the shoot down that happened. And, well, should I make you wait to... because it's sort of a twist that I haven't exactly heard, and he did seem to substantiate it quite well, which I can't do for you because he does it on my video, but I can say out of my brief recall of what he said is that actually Putin shot it down with full knowledge that on that plane supposedly was, among other things, a bioterrorism agent that was supposed to, the whole plane was heading, was supposed to go to Kuala Lumpur. Instead, it was heading towards a Russian city. And so that it was shot down over Ukraine because it was going to be used as a, as in a sense, a dirty bomb with a bioterrorism agent to hit a Russian city. And so from the point of view of, you can understand that if Putin did that with full knowledge, it was somewhat understandable. Now, it's not pleasant that all these people died. And those dead bodies from Flight 370 were on the plane. And that the reason they kept people off that, wouldn't allow people in the crash site, he said, is because the bio agent was there and they had to clean up some stuff and whatnot. But that it was literally shot down by a Russian, I guess, fighter that nobody's talking about, none of the press, nobody. You hear about two sort of wing jets that were part of the Ukraine, I think the Ukrainian military, whatever, that were sort of flying alongside that plane, but you don't hear about a fourth plane that was there. 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, that was Russian, that actually did the shooting, apparently using this sort of, he explains it all in my interview that I just did with him. Very interesting. So I don't know, that should be front page news when I put it out. We think it'll get there? No. Oh, well, So let's see. Okay, just briefly, just so we can circle back. So the bottom line is, so that you understand, when Camelot tells you what's really going on, and when we reveal this whistleblower testimony, and when we cross-correlate all this information, and that way we are able to substantiate, at least to our satisfaction, that what we're putting out there is going to be important enough to listen to, and maybe even could save your lives or the lives of your children, et cetera, et cetera. What we're doing is something that we totally believe in. And so but by the same token, we are not advocates of the people we interview. So my relationship with them is as an investigative reporter. I am documenting the truth. I am putting it out there for you to make your final decision as to what you want to believe and what you don't. And I can tell you unequivocally that whistleblowers, in order to save their own lives, even though they're whistleblowers, and the lives of their families, their girlfriends, boyfriends, etc., extended families, will have to pepper their testimony, often knowingly, with some disinfo, or they simply won't tell you the real truth about whatever it is. And I can tell you that Simon Parks even is right. He's walking that very thin line between truth and falsity, and by saving his own life, and by making sure that he also serves whoever he considers to be those he wants to serve, whether they be, in his case, the mantids. He's 33% reptilian as well. I wouldn't discount that he's doing something for that race, as well as 33% human. So in his case, he's making his choices, and he's also comes from a magic family. He's a magician himself, which I asked him. So what does that mean? You have to understand what it is to be. You study the occult, you start to understand. It doesn't mean you have to become a dark magician to read about the occult, to understand what is motivating these people to do the things they do, to do the false flags they do, for example. And we talked about that. And that goes for Mark Richards as well. And he also verified the raptors that Mark Richards is dealing with from the point of view of the mantids, which was a very interesting sort of take. I mean, you hear these races talking about each other and their own agendas, and you hear the perspective coming through somebody who's close to the mantids, like someone like Simon, or someone like Mark Richards, who's close to the raptors. And so it goes. And there are people out there who are close to the Greys, and they are giving you testimony as well. I'm not a big fan of the Greys, and I'm not a big fan of the Zetas. And there are some Greys, however, or what we call Greys, and there are many races, apparently, but there are some good guys out there. And apparently there is a race of blue Greys that are quite good and have been serving humanity for quite a while here. And, you heard David Griffin talk about how they're helping in terms of identifying this black nano oil in the Gulf. Camelot did a huge investigation. I've done multiple what we call live stream interviews, and David Griffin has been on them. I've talked to Miles Johnston, who has quite a bit of background in that area as well. So we are trying to, I often try to bring, more than one head together in other words, we're strong if we're together. And if we're bringing our testimony from all different places and cross-correlating and comparing and contrasting the things we're getting. This is what we need to do, okay? So this is not doom and gloom. This is find out what's real, find out what they're plotting. We do have enemies. We also have friends. Finding out what the playing field's all about. And then making your choices. Where do you want to stand? Where do you stand in this fight for humanity and to create a future for us on this planet, on this amazing jewel of a planet, and for your children? So this is what it's really all about. And thank you for listening. So Pete Peterson is one of those witnesses. Now, Pete Peterson had this burning desire to talk, so we went to he invited us to his house. We were connected through a third party. And it was me and David Wilcock, and Bill and I weren't really getting along at that time. And by the way, Bill and I have split up, in case you don't know that. Some people really don't even know that. We split our sort of operations a long time ago. It's now been about four and a half years. He went on to Project Avalon and has a forum over there and is retired, or whatever you want to call it, to Ecuador. And I'm, still out on the circuit doing Camelot. So I took complete control of Project Camelot at that point. But at any rate, during the schism between Bill and I told David Wilcock that I had an incredible witness that had no way to get there. And so when David Wilcock heard about my incredible witness, he said, I'm going to make this happen for you. And so he did. He financially helped me pay my plane ticket, as I recall. And then all of a sudden we told Bill about it, and then Bill wanted to come. So then the three of us ended up there. And that weekend we went from the Friday, like late afternoon, and Pete started talking. He would talk into 4 in the morning every night. And nonstop. And this was all off the record. So we talked for the Friday night, all day Saturday, until Saturday, to do something else. That they need to break away and they need to wake people up as to what's really going on. And they start to have a schism sort of in their personality in which they can't handle it anymore. And they become, even in some cases, like Richard Allen Miller and Henry Deacon, they become even slightly unbalanced as a result. They become so angry, like Bob Dean, Command Sergeant Robert O. Dean, that they break their security oaths and they go out and they start telling the truth. And what happened was, when we hit the scene back over 8.5 years ago, there was no organization like us. I don't know why we got this brilliant idea, but we did. And I'm sure we had help. But the thing is that we decided that we would start interviewing whistleblowers from above, top secret, and we sort of put out a shingle, we put out a website, and we found one person to start interviewing. And YouTube was there for us at that time, and it was a coalition of forces that allowed us to become who we are today. And basically, we never looked back. We had no idea anyone would ever watch our videos. We didn't know what was going to happen. Yes. Oh, yes. Well, I'll finish the story. But by virtue of being one, we have been told that certain super soldiers have self-destructs. If they were ever to turn against the United States, most of them are working for the United States, the secret space program, that they would instantaneously self-destruct. I haven't tested it, but it sounds believable. The person who told us that, among other people, was Dr. Pete Peterson. And our Pete Peterson, he's one of the very stellar witnesses who is a scientist, who is a black project scientist who grew up in black projects working for them. He was recruited at a very young age, and we spent an entire weekend with him. We did over 6 hours of interview with him, but the entire weekend This is a man who had been quiet his whole life. They had sort of retired him to a certain area of the northern United States that was very sort of low density in terms of population, and figured he would just go into the night quietly, so to speak. He was burning to talk about what he knew. He felt a burning desire to also waken people. And this is what happens to a whistleblower. What happens is they actually come in with a mission. They're not even aware of their mission half the time. But partway through their service to the dark side, they start to wake up and they start to realize that they need okay. Obviously, the Illuminati don't work alone. This is a no-brainer, and I've got, let me just say this in terms of the providence of information. Everything I tell you comes because I have at least 3 sources, and they're independent sources, and that's how intelligence agencies work also, by the way. They get 3 totally independent sources who don't know each other coming up with the same information, okay? And so that's what we do. We use that as sort of a barometer to begin our investigations. And then beyond that, I use my intuition, which has served us extremely well over the years in Camelot and continues to do so. And beyond that, we may have personal referral, or we may have, go through the process of sort of vetting the person and finding out more and more about them, spending time with them. We end up being friends with a lot of the people we've interviewed. In terms of super soldiers, an interesting dynamic happened about 4 years into Camelot, in which the powers that be started to turn them against us. So that every time I interview anybody who's a super soldier now, and now the time span in which they turn against us is now down to like a few days or a week later. And I'm not going to name any names, but simply to say that, and then you'll kind of go on my site and you'll see who is who, and you'll probably be able to put 2 and 2 together. But the bottom line is that these people are programmed to turn like rabid dogs on humans when ordered to do so. I mean, that's the nature of being a super soldier. You work for the man, but you work for the man in such a heightened way that you're accessible. Why are you more accessible than the average person? Because they put their nanotech, their physical technology in your body, just as you saw with Kieran. And it's more than that. I mean, he maybe even be sort of like a sort of medium level super soldier kind of activated person. Now, when we say super soldier, it doesn't mean they have big muscles and they can throw things across the room like, whatever. That's not what, we're not the Invisible Hulk or whatever it's called. A super soldier means they have super abilities. So they're super psychic, they're a very good spy, they can use some special abilities to get from point A to point B, to psychoanalyze you, to do whatever they need to do to accomplish their mission. So that's what we're really talking about when we use the term super soldiers.